out to you, and some of you may have some of these from a meeting or two earlier. And this would be the time when we were going to start having some conversation about reorganization and about if people in this group feel compelled to talk about and pursue some issues or concerns or studies related to reorganization. The very first sheet, I'm just going to go through these quickly, and then the conversation is really turned over to you. Reorganization, as we would possibly think about it, would probably be through a petition method of reorganization, which would mean that petitions are solicited and then there's a call for a vote. Okay? And that has some timelines, and you can see what those are. And if you were present when the administrator from the AEA presented about last fall here, she talked about some of that timeline and what that process was like. The second sheet, it's called Talking Points Number 2, are reorganization incentives. And we really talked in the last two meetings at different times about what the financial incentives were. And this also alludes to what the reduction in foundation property tax levies might be for a school that goes through reorganization. So it's just another piece of information that I got from the DE website. The third piece, or the third talking point, really refers to a group. It's a Special Citizens Advisory Committee. And if you look at that first couple of paragraphs on that page, it says the purpose of this talking point is to provide an outline of the basic steps that may be taken by a school board as it plans for school district reorganization. The concept of citizen involvement suggests that the board measures the public sentiment, informs the citizens of the possible need to reorganize or share, and conveys the board's recommended action to the voters. Usually, through the routine operation of open board meetings, the public will be aware of the board's discussion of reorganization. However, because of the extreme importance and consequences of the topic, the board is urged to plan and inform the public of the steps it will take in that citizen process. And it truly is a citizen-driven process, and it may be accomplished without any board involvement. However, a successful reorganization is more likely if the school board takes an active role in it. But it's not the board's role to solicit signatures for the petition or really do some sort of study about the feasibility of a reorganization. Another important aspect of citizen involvement is the school board appointed Special Citizens Advisory Committee or a study committee. The board can appoint a committee, but a committee can organize on its own. You know, frankly, tomorrow, somebody or somebodies could walk out the door and decide that they're going to get signed petitions of the magnitude that would call for a vote. It could just happen that quickly. Now, the chances of that passing in a district would probably be slim to none, as there's not any preparation for nor knowledge of why reorganization would take part unless people are really informed and their questions are answered. So on the bottom of that page, it talks about establishing a committee and just some questions that can be answered related to that committee. And if you turn back to the back side of it, it talks about how do you select committee members, how do you organize, and then how do the board and the committee in a school district relate to each other? What's the information that a board would want from that committee? And then the last page, which looks kind of like an outline, like this one here. If you remember at one time I talked to you about the fact that one of the aspects that can be considered in reorganization is really a study related to reorganization. And this continues to be clear as mud, so I'm going to try one more time and see if I can help with the description of this. Walleye, Pugh, Auburn, and Sac had a feasibility study conducted by the Department of Education before whole grade sharing. Okay, and a person came from the Department of Ed, spent a day or two in each of the districts with long lists of questions, looking at exactly the same things in both districts, talking to the same kinds of groups of people. So there'd be groups of parents from both districts, there were groups of students, there were groups of faculty and community people, and then he asked for documents. So there were financial documents, there were academic histories, there was enrollment history, there was lots of financial data that he was asking for, and he did that from both districts. And if you remember, he wrote a final report. And in that, one of the things that was asked of him then was, would that person make a recommendation about where the high school and the middle school would be? thinking he was the outside person and maybe that would be safer for him to make that recommendation, just taking a look at everything. And he did exactly those things. And I think he presented a final report downstairs in the small gym to a combined audience of Sac and Wall Lakeview Auburn people, and we had a joint board meeting at that time, and he really went through what that data looked like. Well, from there, then the conversations about whole grade sharing continued to move on, because it looked as if it was feasible for Wall Lakeview Auburn and Sac to merge in some way in whole grade sharing. In the state documents related to reorganization, it will talk about a feasibility study again. And frankly, it can happen in two ways. It can be the Department of Ed, who no longer has that person, by the way, so it would be a group that would have to come to the board asking for somebody to be hired, some private person who does this for a living, to come in and do some sort of a study, and that study would have to do with these topics generally that are listed on this sheet of paper. Or a committee like this group of people, and maybe larger than this group, so you can divide the work, take on gathering the data and the information, because there's new information now. The academic information from each separate district, let's just talk about the courses offered, is substantially different today than it was when Sac and Wall Lakeview Auburn were separate schools. Substantially different course offerings. Well, what would you want if you're people that are for, anybody that's for reorganization, you would want somebody to know that that's a benefit of both whole grade sharing and then could be an ongoing benefit of consolidation, for instance. So this is a list that comes out of a probably about 100-page document at the DE website suggesting the topics that might be studied. It can be done by some independent person that's hired. It can be done, it says, by the DE, although there's no one at the DE that, I just don't think we could ask anyone at the DE, because I think what they'd say to us is that there's no such person. We don't have any personnel to do that. But I think they could give us the names of people who probably could come out and could conduct the feasibility study. And I think they do it in about the way the study was done before whole grade sharing, which is come to the district, but probably now just talk to a citizen advisory committee that's shared, a student body that's shared, a faculty that's shared, and talk to those people about those same pieces of information. Or a group like this can put a study together. And one of the things I think, and maybe this is a figment of my imagination, but I think at the last meeting we talked about maybe a pair, 2 or 3 people would take on a topic, and the school's role really would be one of providing information to you. So if it was finance and property valuations, it'd probably be garnering a lot of information from the DE website, the Department of Ed website, as well as from the business managers about what would be information that people might want to know if they were talking about coming to a vote for reorganization. And with that,
so that feasibility study has to be done again, you're saying?
it wouldn't have to be.
Okay.
This would just be Barb Krudoff's opinion. I don't know that it has to be a feasibility study. I would think you'd want people to know more about the difference between Sac, Wall Lakeview, Auburn 3 years ago, 5 years ago, and East Sac County today than what many people probably know.
Would this just be general knowledge that we would have if somebody asked us, or would this be something we present sometime?
The document from the document from the DE website suggests that you put it in writing, because typically you'll have community. I'll say you. Somebody will have some community meetings where you provide information. You've got newsletter articles or you've got newspaper articles trying to talk about the facts about the district now versus earlier when we were two separate districts.
Yes. These are ones they recommended. You don't necessarily need to do all of them, but are there particular ones that are most important to the people they have found? Or?
Well, I don't know that, but you might have some clues as community people to what do you think people don't understand or don't know. Or if we were talking about continuing whole grade sharing into eternity versus reorganization, what would somebody have to know to say, well, then I should vote for that? And I think, and looking at Steve, but I think you asked that question last time, so what would be the difference?